Hello, my name is Reilly McCabe, and I will be presenting my Toulmin argument. So for my topic, I chose children involved in war. War has always been an issue in human history. It goes back as late as 2700 BC, and unfortunately most of the time, civilians are the ones who suffer the most in these wars, and recently more attention has been brought to how children are involved in wars. So for my claim, I have that children who are involved in wars often escape with serious psychological and developmental issues. So to start with my support, my first point is that most children end up with some sort of psychological illness. Mr. Frey, who teaches at the University of Anbar in Iraq, provides a statistic that states that a group of Iraq children who witnessed the bombing in 1991, 80% of them later ended up with PTSD symptoms. This shows a clear correlation between witnessing an event in a war as a child to the development of mental disorders later in life. Manitoba Education, located in Canada, and Bruce Hare, who teaches at Leiden University, also go on to add that depression and anxiety rates go up in children involved in war, as well as increased stigmatization from their communities as they return. My next point is that war often causes a loss of identity in a child. A great example of this would be Eli Wiesel, who was a teenager and Jewish during World War II. He was sent to the Auschwitz concentration camp and wrote a book called Night, describing his experiences in the camp. He stated that he was frustrated with God and confused why the men around him would pray for God when he was doing nothing to help and doing nothing to stop the Germans. And the fact that this teenager who was always Jewish, always believed in God his whole life, started questioning God because of the conflict shows the big obvious effect that war can have on a child's mental health. Mrs. Barbara, who teaches at McMaster University, wrote an article on how children are affected by war, and she stated that when children feel a certain amount of indifference from the world around them, they can start to feel indifference for themselves. And this is obviously, very devastating and damaging to a child because when they start to think, oh, well, the world doesn't think I'm important, I should think I'm important, it's just going to create a really negative and fixed mindset for the rest of their lives. Dr. Kadir and other doctors in the American Academy of Pediatrics wrote a report on children involved in war and stated that children who are recruited as soldiers are often forced to isolate and de-identify. And this shows an obvious sense of loss of identity because when you're forced to forget who you were and adopt someone new, you lose a part of yourself. My last point for support is that there is behavior change when children are involved in war. Frey comes again to say that there are abnormal behaviors noted, that there's either indifference or hysterical outbreaks, and this obviously makes sense. These children see and witness and experience so much in the wars that after they just need time to process or take it in, and this can result in a feeling of apathy and the outbreaks and the bursts by these children, and it's just an obvious behavior change that wasn't there before. And Frey also adds on to say that some have a heart that is so scarred it can be hurt no further, and they're just indifferent the rest of their lives. And this can be really damaging because they can feel almost nothing for the rest of their lives due to this war and this experience when they were a child. I also have a chart that adds on to this piece of support. It shows the toll of the war in Syria on its children, and down here it says that 80% of the children are reported to be more aggressive after the war. So that also shows another abnormal behavior change. For my warrant, I have that humans have always been involved in war. Sarah P.C., who teaches at UCL in London, wrote an article on humans' involvement in war throughout history, and she provided a piece of evidence that stated that over 10,000 years ago, bones were found due to conflict between different groups, and with these bones, children's bones were found. So not only does it show how long and far back war has been in human history, but how children have always been involved in war. And she also goes on to say that some researchers even say the first conflicts and wars started during the Neolithic Revolution, which is said to be 12,000 years ago. So that's even earlier and adds just more support to the warrant. For my rebuttal, objections I have include that war does not lead to deterioration in human health. This is not true because Frey provides another statistic saying that a group of Lebanese children involved in war reported that 10 years later, 43% of them still had symptoms. So obviously it does lead to deterioration as well as a persisting deterioration in mental health. Another objection is that war affects children all the same way psychologically, but this just isn't true because some children, due to their genetics, behavior, development before the war, can have differing levels of resilience built up in them, and that's why some children can leave war unharmed and other children be scarred for life. My last objection is that mostly boys are children soldiers. This isn't true, unfortunately, because here it comes back to say that 30 to 40% of soldiers in Africa, children soldiers, are girls, and they are especially vulnerable due to the gender equality and conditions they still face in Africa. So obviously, it's very unfortunate and sad what children involved in wars go through these days. I could never imagine going through what I see sometimes on the TV and the news of these children, and that's why it's really important that people raise awareness about this issue and that we start to take action to save these children from what they're going through. Thank you.